afternoon, Hempfest, Sunday, 2016. We're at the Hemposium, and it's been an incredible day. The weather Friday was more than made up for incredible weather on Saturday and Sunday, and we're really glad you're here in the Hemposium tent. Right now, our panel is on innovations, the cutting edge, from topicals to terpenes, and we've got 4 incredible entrepreneurs here that are at the cutting edge to tell you about it. All right, we have Warner, whose Cannabis Basics company is going viral. She almost single-handedly got through a provision in the Washington legislature that allows topicals to be sold no matter what their content, as long as they're just topicals. It's incredible, and it can send your products. You can explain it in more detail, but it's close enough. Alison Draisin, Edeluz was an incredible brand. Edeluz, she'll tell you its status, but my guess is, like all the other medical companies, everything medical here, all these incredible entrepreneurs that got us this far in this revolution are being run over by new entities under the guise of whatever. Anyhow, and medical has been run over, and that could be a topic here today. I'm not sure Alison's current direction. She can tell us about this. Wes Abney does Northwest Leaf, an incredible periodical. And next to me here is my colleague, Robert Clark. This is my guru, everybody. I'm really glad to be on the stage with him. When I got into really trying to learn about cannabis, this was the guy. He had written the book on cannabis botany in the late 80s, and he's written a book on hashish, and wrote a book on, the Pests in Cannabis book. That's the most academic book done to his newest book here on the ethnobotany of cannabis with Mark Merlin. They're all incredible publications. He was the editor of the Journal of Industrial Hemp for many years. He's traveled the world. He has amassed an amazing knowledge. He's probably got 3 or 4 other books almost written, but they have to be perfect before I'll let you see them. And he's a photographer of anybody's dreams. So we got all that. Let's just go one after the other. Talk about what you think is the cutting edge. What should these people be thinking if they want to get into this exploding market?
Starting with me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I can tell you what the cutting edge is in my little niche. The cutting edge for me is that really hemp seed oil and cannabinoids from marijuana can be used in pretty much any daily product that we use today. So if you think about lotions, bath salts, lip butters, hemorrhoid, tux medicated pads, high-end, no, seriously, because it's an anti-inflammatory and it's antibacterial. Cosmetics, high-end cosmetics that would be anti-aging face creams and eye serums and natural makeup with natural pigments, so that we're not using all these chemical elements. What's happened here in the state of Washington, that what Donnie alluded to, and I didn't single-handedly do it, I had a lot of help. Carrie Boyder, thank you very much, and Doug Hyatt was amazing for helping me to figure out how to craft a little bit of legislation that would define cannabis topicals that are less than 0.3% THC, that don't get ingested and that do not get you high. They're actually now defined by law as cannabis health and beauty aids. So those products now, by law, can be sold anywhere in the state of Washington in a mainstream store. So we're talking Bartell's, Whole Foods, Super Supplements, Ace Hardware, wherever we choose. So the biggest thing that you can actually do to push this along is when you go to your favorite stores, you ask them, where are their cannabis health and beauty aids? So you challenge them, well, it's legal for you to now sell them, so we would like to be able to buy them from you. And trust me, business people want to carry what people want to buy. So that's kind of the biggest thing we're sitting on here, is this really little bit of tweak in the law that allows for these. But really what that law did was it it's really the first chipping away of the Washington State Controlled Substances Act here in the state of Washington, which is no small little thing. It's really exciting. Oh, that's good.
Hi, I'm Alison. And even though I make edibles, I'm also kind of a hash connoisseur. And so terpenes to me are pretty sexy. And I wanted to find out, does everyone in the audience, do you guys actually know what terpenes are? Does everyone know? Does anyone not know what terpenes are? Well, so what a terpene is think about you have your plant matter, or your flower, your bud, and then you have those little crystals sticking off of them, and those are resin heads. Well, on top of the resin heads, there's like a little membrane, and that's the terpenes. And terpenes are in lots of organic, all over. They're in fruits, they're in plants, they're occurring naturally, just the way they occur naturally in the cannabis plant. The terpenes that are in the cannabis plant, we've found that have a lot of amazing uses. And I've done a lot of studying with Ethan Russo and some of his works, where he talks about how terpenes can actually, certain terpenes can be an antidote for when you get too uncomfortably high. They can mitigate the delta-9s. And so I am really fascinated with how terpenes are able to work with the cannabis plant, work in the cannabis plant. And one of the other things that's been pretty interesting is seeing people separate the terpenes from the actual THC. It's super interesting, and that's kind of where my passions are lying, and I'll be talking about today.
Hello, my name is Wes, editor of Northwest Leaf and Oregon Leaf magazine. To start off about the cutting edge of cannabis, I always like to tell people the cutting edge is now, but we are in the ground floor time of this industry. There is no time better than now to get involved in the cannabis industry in any way, shape, or form. There's jobs being created. This is a new industry, and things are constantly being innovated and becoming better. And so I think, leaving it at that as far as jobs in the industry, jump in. As far as the cutting edge, kind of what Alison talked about in terpenes, I think terpenes are going to become a major talking point for people when they start thinking about the flavors and the essence of cannabis. And this September, I'm actually hosting an event in Portland called Tannins and Terpenes, where people are able to come out and sample small amounts of wine and cannabis and learn about the flavors and the essence and the entourage effect of cannabinoids. And I think that in the future here, we need to fight to have cannabis use anywhere where people can have alcohol use. And ultimately, we all know cannabis is safer than alcohol. And so I think that the cutting edge of this is going to be normalizing our plant, normalizing our culture, and then letting our culture rise from being suppressed to being an actual alpha culture, because we're great, happy, healthy people, and pot makes people better. And I really believe that, and I think the future is very strong for all of us. Thank you.
Well, my interest, really deepest interest of cannabis, is trying to determine the evolution of the plant under domestication, and even earlier. But ever since the beginning of the Holocene and the world started warming up 10, 12,000 years ago, humans have had a relationship with cannabis. And we've molded it in different ways. And one way, since we're talking about terpenes, we'll talk about that. We have two, basically, in Mark's and my minds and other people, we see that cannabis is divided into two species. And I'll give you a little taxonomy here real quick. Cannabis sativa is rope. It's not dope, okay? So calling dope varieties sativas is a misnomer right out of the gates, okay? We see that the other part of cannabis, the vast majority of it, probably 90% of the cannabis that's on Earth, is Cannabis indica. That consisting of 3 subspecies. The 2 that interest us here are Indica subspecies indica, which everybody calls sativa, the narrow-leafed, longer maturing, and we'll talk about in a minute, different terpene profiles from the broad-leafed ones. That's subspecies Afghanica. That's what everybody calls indica. And there are reasons why we came to this misnomer, but kindly in the future reserve sativa for hemp, for rope, and Indica and Afghanica rather than sativa and Indica for the drug varieties, okay? Now what we have today is a blending of Indica and Afghan, of narrow leaf drug varieties and broadleaf drug varieties. And along with these two gene pools came different cannabinoids and also different terpenoids. Terpenoids being, well, we should just say terpenes actually. Terpenoids are a subgroup of the terpenes that have been modified chemically, okay, and both are in cannabis. As well as a lot of aroma ingredients that are not terpenes, but they're aromatic, all right? And those things all are what make the different highs in cannabis. This is what we're finding. THC by itself is boring. And until these CBD varieties came along, these new medical varieties, not just abstracts of social varieties, better to call them than recreational varieties, we've come to this mix, this hybrid mix. It's a mishmash. As Michael Bacchus said the other day, it's a trailer park model, okay? The first generations out of the mishmash of a trailer park are some handsome boys and girls. And after that, it gets a little inbred, you know? They should have left home a little earlier. So that's what we're dealing with cannabis. You have this complete range from nearly narrow leaf varieties to nearly broadleaf varieties, and a few land races that built all these Afghan land races, or Mexican, Thais, Colombians, Jamaicans, the narrow leafed ones, and those are almost gone now. There's still a few around, but what we have left is a real mishmash. With the terpenes, it's become a non-tourage effect. So many varieties have a little bit of all the terpenes. This is sort of how the breeding has gone. It's an accumulative kind of thing. So it's hard now to find, for me at least, to find varieties that are unique in a particular way. They're strong as hell, they smell good, they look good in a bag or a bottle, but the diversity is really minimal. And that's the final message, terpene diversity, all the diversity. We need to enhance this. We've managed to come down to such a narrow genetic base for what we're working with. We're actually, despite all the varieties you see, kind of on the edge of blowing it. You know, we need to bring in some new juice. The trailer park needs new residents. Well, they're going to come from those shoe boxes and cigar boxes. And remember those little film cans where they stuck their seeds in? Well, go dig in your bloody closet, you know? Go get them out. Sprout them. And if you can't sprout them, the Phylos Bioscience Cannabis Evolution Project would love to sequence the DNA that's in them. So sprout them. Give us some leaves if you sprout them, but if they're not going to sprout, dry them off real good and let us have them, and let's get some science out of it.
Right on. Well, this great panel must have sparked some good audience questions here, right? Who's got one? I'll come to you in a second here. I do want to say our next panel very well follows this one. These people are talking about all the great innovations that can take place in cannabis, but oh, we don't have it. Oh, okay, I'm being corrected. So, coming up next is the Ngayo Show.
Hi, I was at the Patients at a Time conference in West Palm Beach in May, and one of the panels there, some scientists were talking about new research that seems to show that the terpenes actually interact with the cannabinoids for the medical effects. And there may be advantages, for instance, to smoking over vaping for medical purposes. And I was wondering if any of you have heard anything about, research with terpenes having some medical effect, and what do you think of that?
I can take it quickly from my perspective. Terpenes are really important to topicals, like terpenes like beta-carotene and linalool actually help the cannabinoids to absorb through the top layers of the skin. So to kind of build in a transdermal, if you will, effect, and that definitely adds to the efficacy of everything that I do. So super important and built in and all natural. You don't have to use something like a DMSO to do the same thing when you could use the terpene naturally.
I would also agree. There's myrcene, which has been found to be really amazing for pain relief. And you find that in like your cushes or your broader leafed plants where you're going to have higher myrcene. And so I definitely see myrcene as being really amazing for chronic pain treatment.
And we're kind of lucky with that because myrcene, the high myrcene, high limonene terpene classes, if you will. This will be published pretty soon, not by me, but it's coming up. And the biggest class statistically are the cushes, the OGs, this sort of stuff, the myrcene dominant ones. And this is probably largely because skunk number 1 that came out of the Netherlands a long time ago has exactly that profile. And caryophyllene would be the third prominent one, but about 85% of the terpenes in skunk number 1 are myrcene. So that's the root to a lot of the varieties we have. It came to us a long time ago. The prominent terpene in the hop plant, and hops cones, is also myrcene. So this is an early evolutionary thing back when they were probably before hops and hemp were separate plants. So it's kind of far out that way too.
And you have that Israeli study that was published last month where they compared a CBD extract with a CBD isolate. You know, so you're comparing the whole plant extract versus just the CBD alone, and the whole plant extract proved far more effective in their studies. And I think that'll get duplicated with THC or anything else. The Sativex is all pretty much whole plant extract, you know, because THC alone is a very boring drug.
It really is. Pure THC is just not interesting at all. And you just get these extracts that the labs are doing these days where they're getting out every terpene, then they get them so pure they stick the terpenes back in. You overdo that a little bit and it's called solvent abuse. You know, you got to get little tiny amounts of these things for them to be effective and for them to be safe, I would think, and to taste good and work.
Kenny Morrow does a lot of separation of the THC and the terpenes. And I have to say that I don't really like, it's the only chance I've ever truly had to separate it. And the THC really isn't good by itself.
So I've been somewhat fearful of what I'm going to talk about. So for the last couple of years, there have been people working on creating a blend and then reintroducing terpenes into it. You can actually harvest, you know, the terpenes that are in cannabis are not significantly different than the ones in other botanicals. And then creating a THC blend and then making a compounded medicine out of it, which is, you know, breaks my organic heart, but is seemingly where the pharmaceutical industry is going to run with this. And so what is the state of that? I mean, that seems to me to be the mainstream cutting edge of the people who are not going to want to smoke products and would that feel more comfortable with a scientific compounded medicine and, you know, allopathic Western medicine rather than this.
I think they're deluding themselves. It's like John said earlier today. As soon as these medicines are perceived, these plants are perceived as medicines, they're going to be legislated that way. Don't you think the Food and Drug Administration is just dying to get out the only thing they've ever seen that's both a food, touted to be a food, and a drug? And they're going to go nuts with this. And I think people who are cubby-holing themselves to the scientific side, if you want to call it that, and trying to look like legit medical people, we tried this years ago in the Netherlands. We tried to make a Marinol equivalent. You would not believe the hassles. We allied with Merck Generics. They couldn't get it into the United States. They have all the lawyers and all the money on the planet, and they couldn't do it. So if you think you're going to get a naturally derived THC, and not you, but all you other folks out there are doing this, you are barking up the wrong tree and wasting your time and money. Is the advice I'd give you right here and now. Go on with natural formulations and get away from trying to look straight.
But we were just 20 years ahead of our time, Rob.
I think, you know, also though, your question of are thank you. Pharmacological companies are trying to take this plant from us. And every time I look at GW Pharmaceutical stock and I see it going down because Sativex is tanking, I get a big smile. Because it truly is about the natural plant. But being real, you know, they are trying to use terpenes. They are trying to use flavonoids. They are trying to find ways to create a cannabis capsule. And you know, I don't know if that is good or bad. It comes with kind of good and evil. And it's a question we have to ask ourselves as we move forward with this as a medicine and as a recreational substance, which direction we want it to go. And if we want to keep the industry in small business hands and out of big pharma, then we'll prevent, you know, the perversion of our plant.
Well, you know, I love hearing GW being called big pharma. And I also wonder why you say that Sativex isn't a natural plant.
Well, Sativex is a 1-to-1 synthetic THC and CBD.
Not at all true, Wes.
They're both naturally derived from 2 different varieties and blended later.
That Rob gets credit for
The
breathing.
CBD is grown outside in the UK, and the skunk number 1 that they use for their production is grown indoors, and, or actually in supplementally lighted greenhouses. And they blend them later.
Let's see, next questions from Jerry here, who's doing the hemp convention in Oregon Medical Cannabis Cup, October 10th and 11th in Portland.
Thanks, panel, for being here today. Through our research and development, what we're doing out on the farm in Oregon growing hemp, we're real proud to be doing this in Oregon, first of all. We come through a lot of leaps and bounds to get to where we've gotten.
Yeah.
But we've been in this industry for a little bit, just like all of us. So what we found out is the more that you take the plant out of its natural state, it's kind of like the worse off you are. If you can leave that baby in its natural state, it's a blessing from the higher spirits. And so I'm just saying, I've taken and purchased natural limonene and different types of substances and tried to add them back in and played around with it with a lot of different edible products and whatnot. But once you start playing with Mother Nature, I'm a farmer by trade, you're playing with the man upstairs. So I'm just telling everybody here, from what I know, don't mess with it. Let it happen. Thank you.
Yes. Yes. First, I wanted to thank you all for being here, and I wanted to ask if you think that in the future we'll have these technologies to to rescue the terpenes from our growing plants, in a way.
That would be interesting. I'm gonna let you take this.
Now, this is really interesting. There are a couple of things that have been worked on to get the terpenes back out of even a grow room, okay? And you should be able to condense the terpenes back out. The smell that you get in a grow room that you're exhausting, that irritates your neighbors and alerts the police. You should be able to get those back out. They do it in the citrus industry. They take, that's why we have so much limonene. They basically take it out of citrus production, and we have heaps of natural limonene. That you need to. The other technique that I've heard about is you know when you make water hash and the water smells really good and then you dump it down the drain? Well, that's kind of a loss there too. So there are ways, I don't know exactly how it's being done, but there are people who have figured out ways without solvents to get those terpenes back out of the water. They're doing some kind of partitioning. It's not that difficult if you're a organic chemist guy, but yeah, without doing anything except getting them back, they're getting it. And they get the whole suite. You know, the funny thing is that we're so used to losing terpenes that if you take the terpenes you took out of the water hash and you put them all back in that water hash where you think they belong, way too many terpenes. You know, that's overdosing it too. So actually, if we start collecting them, we'll have a surplus of them. It's just like all the other industries. So.
We're losing a lot of terpenes whenever you make bubble hash. It's pretty amazing.
Or put the bag in your pocket.
Or as the Oregon farmer said, anytime you mess with it at all, you know, you're getting fried. Every time you smell your weed, you're losing terpenes. All right?
Do this.
No, you got to keep it in glass jars and in a cool, dark place, and rarely ever open it.
Yeah, and little containers, so just open a little bit at a time. Seal meals in the freezer.
In the freezer.
Yeah.
Not everyone agrees with the freezer, but you know.
In and out of the freezer, no
I
good.
like it.
In once, out once, beautiful.
I got to thank our panel. That's all the time we've got.
Thank you.
Okay, Al Warner, Alison Draisin, Wes Abney.
You get to smoke any terpenes. Sorry. You were good.
Thank you so much for coming and talking to the Hemposium today, Sunday, 2015. We have the Engayo show coming up right now, but I'm sorry. Hey, I just got cut off, and I'm told we can keep going. Isn't that great? Great. So, who's got a question? Let's see. Susan was next.
While we're going for that, I want to mention something that Oz said earlier. Terpenes are great facilitators for getting compounds across membranes. Quick example. Do you remember Hall's mentholyptus cough drops?
Yes.
That's in there to get the soothing sugar down your throat and get the stuff in there. It's menthol is a terpene found in cannabis, and eucalyptol is from eucalyptus. Most terpenes are named after their primary source. Limonene from limes and lemons. Those are classic examples. We've used them for years and years in over-the-counter products to make it work better, that facilitate their use.
So can I just say one more thing about terpenes and that blank slate kind of situation? Because in my process, when I'm formulating, when I'm extracting, and I'm starting to do some straight up extraction, but mostly it's fat infusion, and I lose almost all of my terpenes in that. In my process with topicals, it's different than adding terps back into vapor, to concentrate to vape or whatever you're going to do. These terpenes are part of the formulation. So lavender, eucalyptus, cinnamon, myrrh, all that stuff is actually added to it. So topicals are actually very rich in all of these terpenes. And it depends on what the blend is, but it's a great source of terpenes for topical therapy. Yeah.
I wanted to add a little bit. So I mentioned earlier about how certain terpenes can be antidotes to mitigate the effects of delta-9s. So Ethan Russo studied and came out with an article in the British Journal of Psychopharmacology about how limonene and pinene, which are found in orange juice, lemonade, pine nuts, pistachio nuts, black pepper is also another one that's different terpene. How limonene, so the limonene and the pinene actually balance the delta-9. So if you get too uncomfortable, I always tell people to keep some orange juice on hand, because if you get too uncomfortably high, drink your orange juice and you can feel better. You still have the body high. It just mitigates the delta-9 heady effects of it. But that's one way that it can be used medically, I guess, if you're too high.
Gee, I always thought it was just the sugar.
Oh, right.
My question for the panel, sorry, excuse me. So we have medical marijuana, the awareness of medical marijuana has emerged outside of the medical authority. And so if they're encouraging plant-based medicine, then how do you see the future for marijuana as a whole plant when the medical authority is very pharmaceutical-based, pill-based?
Well, I think that the future depends on the laws and the legislation that gets passed. As we're progressing, we have states now that have medical marijuana where you cannot smoke it. And so it's very much state by state and county by county, even in, say, California, for what you can do. So the future of the whole plant, even under 502, where you can still go to jail for having a single plant under legalization, the future of the plant is uncertain. I think we have to fight for it, and it's up to us to really work as advocates of our plant and as activists and make sure that we get good laws that protect personal freedoms, keep people out of prison, and protect it as a medicine.
I'd like to just add something to, states' rights and what's going on. Something happened pretty spectacular 2 weeks ago. The National Conference of State Legislators met here in Seattle, last 2 weeks, and they passed a resolution to have the federal government get off the backs of states' rights to control what goes on for marijuana in the state. So this was actually monumental that happened, and almost nobody knows about it.
All right, another one of my gurus here when I was getting into industrial hemp, Chris Conrad, was there with the Business Alliance for Commerce and Hemp, and there were no businesses yet. So he understood. He saw the future and what was going to be needed and how important unity amongst the hemp businesses was, and it's the reason we're here today.
Hey, thanks, Donnie. Thanks, everybody, for being here, too, and thank you for Hemposium being the stage that really brings out the discussions. I have kind of two questions. One of them I don't know enough of it to really ask it very well, but maybe one of you knows, which is I heard that there was a study out of Humboldt State University that kind of suggested that telling someone they were smoking indica or sativa had as much of an effect on them, the response, as actually giving them indica versus sativa. But I don't really know the study, so maybe one of you knows that. My more other question really, though, is the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia, and I think Ron probably has some ideas about that. What the significance of them coming forward. If you could just bring that up and explain to people what that is and why that's so important.
Yeah, the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia is a series of books about a lot of this may be the 40th one, the one about cannabis, 30th, 40th one. And it's an effort to standardize a lot of the herbs that are used in medicines and used herbally, let's just say, in America. So there's one for the salvias and all the different things that go in teas and ointments and balms and things. And part of the normalization process is to look at cannabis this way. And they were a bit resistant to do this, but they finally saw that it would work, and they got a lot of really good experts to help them out and build this. It's a great resource. American Herbal Pharmacopoeia, it's $45 hard copy, and you can order it from Scotts Valley, California. They'll mail it to you. I don't even think there's any postage. So, yeah, it's a really good reference. And I get it now. It'll be in PDF before too long, because that's the way they do it. But they'll sell you a PDF for cheap.
And that just happened last year. The monograph just came out last year, reinstating cannabis as part of the American Pharmacopoeia.
And as far as like the study that you were talking about, the power of suggestion psychologically is so strong. I'm sure that you could tell them all kinds of things, like they were taking acid and they would act like they were on acid. So I think that the power of suggestion is really strong, and I can imagine that probably has some validity, but I'm going to check on that though.
I would like to see this too, and I absolutely believe that would be the result. The biggest problem with trying to do research about this is going to be separating the power of suggestion from everything else. Does a patient receive the relief from medical cannabis that they are getting from the medical cannabis, or is it that they're getting the relief they expect to get from it? And this is only enhanced, this problem is only enhanced by the different aromas of cannabis. Now someone will smell a bag of cannabis and go, without even smoking it, and go, this is going to give me the relief I seek. I'd like to go through and get a bunch of reverse ones that smell like a certain thing and do the opposite. And because you could breed these, we're not stuck with what we have. But that'd be really fun to go around and try to, you might even need these somehow to do an experiment where, first of all, you could not use anyone who'd ever smoked cannabis before. It's going to be difficult. And you can't use paid people because they're paid to do it. So it gets difficult.
For 5 years, I've been asking that question and got the best answer that you said. Is it suggestive, or is there something chemically? Is there anything objectively that I can take to 360 and say, is this sativa and indica? And the answer is no. I asked Dr. Elsa Hooley, that analyzes every piece of marijuana seeds, federally, locally, municipally, in the United States, tens of thousands a week. He says there's absolutely different. Just like he said, there's no difference in the gene pool that we can see, that we can analyze objectively yet. I'm telling you, at this point, other than subjective, it's all snake oil. Now, there's some research that might pin some terpenes with some other ones, but hasn't been released yet, and we're on the verge, we're on the eve of that happening. That's going to happen apparently, but right now, there's nothing genetically, There's nothing chemically that we can tell the difference. It's all snake oil when it comes to sativa and indica. And the people that are in the know that. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. It's snake oil to differentiate any weed in the United States between sativa and indica at this point. There may be evidence coming on the terpenes, so that means we're going to have to define what is.
I don't think so. I think that the terpenes that have a lot to do with whether it's indica or like you get the effects of indica or sativa. That's how I feel. That if it says something has more limonene, I feel that it definitely is much more uplifting when I smoke it versus when it has myrcene in it, where it makes me want to sit on the couch and do nothing. So, I mean, does it need to have the word sativa or indica, or maybe one day we'll be able to like find terpenes and I want this amount of terpenes in my product, or that, or this much limonene, or this much myrcene, and then I can be able to like tailor as to how I want to feel.
I'm with Rob. I think the way that you're talking about sativas and indicas there is an aberration of history, and the way they talked about sativas and indicas 100 years ago, or botanically how it actually was, is a different understanding of what those words mean. Okay, we got. I'm sorry. I had one more question, and I forgot about one more question, and then we can wrap this up.
So I'd like to hear what you guys know about non-THC plant derivatives from cannabis. Indigenous people have been using root balls. There's no THC present. The terpene levels very low, if at all, but there's some alkaloids. These are very hard to test for because you don't have a control, because you don't know what they are, because science isn't what we think it is when it comes to testing. So are any of you working on that? Do you know people who are?
I have met a couple of individual patients who have worked to derive the alkaloids of the cannabis plant. And to be perfectly honest, the science is a little bit over my head, but from what I understand, alkaloids are the basic chemical properties of any drug. And you can have opiate alkaloids, cannabis alkaloids. The work is being done. I just think it's in the future. I think that's what makes this so exciting. But I did once personally try basically a tincture dropper full of alkaloids, and the intense effects, both medicinally and psychologically, it was kind of out of this world. And it made my body feel very much different, and I've been, had a relationship with cannabis for a long time. And I would say the same thing. I once took a shot of terpene water that had been extracted at Green Lion Farms, and we had just medicated and was feeling kind of normal, and took the drink of terpene water, and it was literally like turning up the dial 10 times. And so there is an entourage effect to all this, and we're still learning about it. And so it may not be indica or sativa, but it is happy and euphoric, or sleepy and content, and those aren't anything to be ignored. Those are vital, and that's what makes our plant unique.
Have you talked to Horatio, who makes the terptini? No. Oh yeah, he makes a terptini. He's out of Canada, and he does a lot of work with terpenes as well. And you're right, it's pretty intense in a different way than when you smoke with THC.
If you want to know the cutting edge of what's going on, tune into Hash Church. 9 o'clock every Sunday Pacific time. Next week will be the 47th in a row or something. Mark Bubbleman Richardson does this out of Vancouver, and it's really far out.
You can find it on Bubble Man's World on YouTube, and it's become like a huge cult following, and it's super science oriented. And you're right, it's definitely the best place to get your cannabis science knowledge.
All right. Any? We got about 2 minutes. Any 30 seconds for each of you in a closing thought, or if you want.
I'll say one thing. Not all terpenes are good terpenes. Yeah, I mean, they all have their purpose. But just like all cannabis is not good for each individual, not all terpenes are. Maybe that's the reason why cannabis is not one kind of cannabis that everybody likes.
I would say on Washington politics, brief side note, for patients, we have had a rough year. We've had a rough couple of years, actually. But it's important that we don't stop fighting for our rights and for the right of every person to grow a plant and to enjoy a plant and not to go to jail. So let's not get content. There's a great industry here, but we still need to free the plant and free the people. Thank you.
And I would say that if you're interested in terpenes, definitely, if you consider yourself a cannabis snob and you're interested in cannabis science, look into terpenes, expand your knowledge because it's really, really exciting.
I would also like to say that we have a long way to go, but I think it's really important that we breathe in the moment and celebrate our victories. We added PTSD to our list of illnesses this year. This topical legislation that happened was the first chipping away of the Controlled Substances Act in the state of Washington here. This is a big deal, and so just take a moment and celebrate these things as we continue to fight for the total emancipation of cannabis.
All right, let's thank our panel. Big round of applause. Alison, Draisin, Abney, and Robert Count Clark. All right, coming up, Ngayo. But understand first we have to thank our sponsors. We have to thank Dodge City Sound for incredible work for Hempfest. We got to thank all the volunteers, the stagehands, the security, everybody who makes Hempfest possible. Cannabis Basics, yes, yay, thank you. And the THC Hemp and Medical Clinics. We want to thank Eden Labs. Check out their incredible machine over there.